Welcome to the Kourting Happiness podcast. This is a space where self-care becomes part of your day. A space where you learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness. And my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The Kourting and Kourting Happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in Kourting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 39. We have a special guest on the Kourting Happiness podcast. We're talking with well-being therapist Jamie Lerner. She's the co-author of a book called The Ever-Loving Essence of You. She's also known for her unique ability to reframe the most difficult situations. She's going to help us do just that today. Jamie speaks with me about how we can change our life by changing our storyline. And as a person who's a happiness scholar, I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you. And one of the questions that I wanted to talk with you about, because you have such incredible work in terms of your books, in terms of your website, which we're going to also make sure we share with our listeners so they can also continue to follow you as well. I love that you mentioned and that you talked about developing an interactive approach to well-being. Tell us, what is your interactive approach to well-being?
So it's actually an integrative approach to well-being, but I think that mostly it really refers to the person I'm working with stepping up and taking personal responsibility and harnessing all of their personal power, because I think that that's really where all our power comes from, is from ourselves and the relationship that we continue to have with ourselves. So, yes.
I love that. So an integrative approach to well-being. I love it. I love that in terms of understanding the dynamics of oneself, right? I also really value that you talk about and you work with your clients in regards to this, and that is changing your storyline, change your life. How can it change your life?
Well, I think that our storyline is what we are incessantly telling ourselves and other people. And oftentimes we don't even know how we're feeling about that story, or even if that story is true or relevant in the moment. So once people can identify what their storyline is and how they feel about telling their story, they can make some choices to either update their story, edit their story, update a word or a sentence or a paragraph or a whole chapter of their story. And usually the story that we are telling ourselves and other people is a reflection of the life that we are really wanting to lead, as opposed to some story that we have been told about ourselves. I think there's a real difference.
There is. Tell us about that difference in terms of, you refer to it as the wanting, right? As opposed to what we're told. What is the difference in those dynamics?
Well, I think that we tend to drag a whole lot of ideas from our place of origin and our earliest experiences without even checking in with ourselves and asking ourselves if these things are true and if they have anything to do with us, or they are just things that we heard other important people in our life say to us. And When we can start sorting that out,
Mm.
and understanding that maybe a lot of those things that we took on earlier really are not ours to carry and to bring forward into our story, then that really helps us and opens the door for us to ask ourselves who we are, where we are, and what do we want for ourselves.
I love that when you mention it's not ours to carry, right? So if a person that's listening right now and is saying, but I'm carrying a lot, carrying a lot. How, well, what would you really recommend to that individual to say, you know what, this is not yours to carry. This is what you need to begin to doing to kind of lighten the load or to let go. What would you advise that person to do first?
Well, I kind of like to think about it as sorting socks in the dryer because you have all these socks and they all look like they belong together. But when you really look at them, each sock only has another sock as a pair. And that's often the case with issues. Like if we could look at some of these issues, and I really don't think we need to look back too far in order to move forward, but just maybe something that we heard someone say to us. And instead of asking ourselves, well, is this even true? We just took it on. So we look at these socks, we pull them out of the drawer, and we try to find the pairs. And then we decide if it's ours or not. And I would say that 90% of those socks are not ours. It doesn't match who we are, especially who we are in our now. So that's a kind of a fun and easy process for people. And I think that we need to have some levity about it as well. But we also need permission to do this because a lot of people don't even know that this is an option.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love how you assessed it in regards to socks, right? And being able to, I love that. It's so memorable in terms of understanding of those assortments or how we would go about letting go. And also being able to look as it relates to those pile of socks or, some of the socks that may be missing or some of the socks that the colors are not together. As soon as you shared that, I really began to see the visual nature in terms of almost literally visual storytelling in terms of us being able to kind of search in that pile of socks, so to speak, in terms of understanding ourselves. I love that. As you can tell, in regards to the socks, I think that is so powerful. And it's a great visual for us to be able to really transform and understand ourselves even more. I am also curious because I am a television reporter, news director turned happiness scholar. And so I truly value narratives and storylines and understanding and sharing of our other people's stories. And as a scholar, I've learned to share, in terms of expertise. So I'm so curious in regards to what line of questions should a person ask in regards to going about shaping their story or learning more about their narrative.
Well, I ask clients if they are going to think about what happened to them way back then, if they could do it from the right here and now adult perspective. Because when we can do that, it really looks and feels a whole lot different. We're not small anymore. We're adults, or at least we're grown. And so we can really see that very differently today than we would have as we were a small child or a small person. And I think that when we're able to do that, we're able to tap into the power that it really has given us in our now. It almost like becomes a blessing. Instead of feeling like a victim of something that maybe had happened to us or something that someone had said to us, we can really see it as how it has shaped us in terms of who we are now and as a strength. So that ability to turn something tragic or dramatic or horrific into something that gave us strength and sustenance and power, I think is super helpful.
It really is. I love that because it speaks to the value of resilience. And I love that you are empowering your clients and your community in regards to seeing themselves and being able to truly understand their superpower, because I consider resilience a great superpower. And you really help them in regards to understanding themselves and their strengths. So I love the fact that you are dealing with a strength-based approach in regards to working with your clients and working with your community. I love that you help them in terms of understanding their superpower. That is phenomenal. It really
Well,
is.
as a journalist, you will appreciate this. It really requires giving up all the extra attention that they have gotten all of these years telling their story, the horrors, the drama, because they have gotten a lot of attention from people. The worse it is, the more attention we get. So, how can we reframe our story in such a way that it does really underline our strengths, and also we understand we're not going to have the kind of attention that we're used to, because people aren't really interested in hearing how well you're doing or how strong you are. They want to know about all the horrible things that happen to you. And I think this society, especially, they really put victims on a pedestal. They applaud you for being a victim. And that makes it difficult to give up a storyline that you have been hanging on to for a very long time.
Well, how does a person shift in terms of the mindset, right? In terms of going from a negative mindset in terms of seeing, in terms of their circumstances, how do they go about now shifting in terms of a positive one? What does that look like? And what would you recommend for them in terms of, as you mentioned, letting go, but then also empowering them in terms of valuing a more positive dynamic or positive mindset?
No, I don't know if you have to let it go, but I think that if you could soften the tone of it or edit parts of it so that it feels better when you're telling the story. So even if you don't change the circumstances, but you change components of it that really reflect who you are now, I think it feels so much better to talk about where you've been if you can really emphasize where you are now and how helpful that situation was to who you've become.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting that you say that because even my own journey, so to speak, in regards to going from my work in journalism and now my work as a happiness scholar and the acquiring my PhD and in my area of research focusing on a positive psychology, all comes from a level of desire of wanting to help people, but then also as it relates to coming from being a widow very early on in my career as a television reporter and wanting to be able to serve more and to serve differently. So I love that you mentioned you don't have to let that go, right? But it's about thinking about how it can empower you in terms of being able to serve individuals or thinking about how it's going to serve you as even being a better human being.
Yeah.
So I love that. What brought you? I just briefly shared my story. I want to learn more about you in regards to what brought you to your work.
Well, I was born with knowing, I think we all are. And I chose the field of psychology, and I went on and got my master's degree in social work and had a thriving psychotherapy practice. And all along, I realized that we did not need to look back in order to move forward. I think that in some ways that we weren't really helping people move forward by continuing to focus on the past. It actually became the very reason why people felt like they couldn't move forward, because they were so busy blaming their parents and their teachers and their society and on and on and on. So I gave up my practice And I studied and I traveled, and I really began to understand how important it is for us to step into taking personal responsibility for ourselves and our lives and our desires. And I started doing this in a very different way, really assisting people in assisting themselves, which I think is really the greatest gift that we can give people being in the helping profession, is to assist them in assisting themselves, giving them the opportunity to harness all of their power and create the life that they want, and which I absolutely believe that we can do one thought at a time. So,
I love that. Assisting them to assist themselves and
yes.
changing it one thought at a time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I believe it's Louise Hay or Dr. Wayne Dyer. They talk about, is it change your life? Change the way you see things, change your life, right?
Change your mind. Yes.
Yes, I
Change your mind.
paraphrased it and
Yeah.
stumbled on it, but absolutely exactly what you just shared. And it speaks to so much of that in regards to really being able to embrace one's power, right? In terms of how we see things and being able to really understand how powerful we are in our dynamic. So I love that in terms of allowing people to understand their power. I'm curious, we may have someone listening who feels stuck, right? What would you say to them in terms of getting unstuck in regards to getting out of their own way, right? In terms of maybe how they see things and their thought pattern. How would you recommend, or what would you recommend, I should say, excuse me, what would you recommend in regards to them getting unstuck?
I believe that stuck is just a moment, and that's all. And I think that we get stuck in a moment and feel paralyzed. And somehow we feel that this feeling of stuck is our life when it's not. It's a moment in our life. So, how can we reach for a better feeling thought? Because I think we shift out of feeling stuck moment by moment. Or we can stay very stuck because we stay on that thought that keeps us there. And I like to think about it as if you're stuck in the mud. And if you keep pressing the gas pedal, you get in deeper and deeper and deeper. But if you just turn the steering wheel slightly and press on the gas slowly, then you begin to move forward. And that's all it takes. So, first to know when you're stuck, then to know that you can feel better and there's a choice to be made, but only you can make that choice for you. So, take a breath, laugh about it, shift a little. And what I like to do when I'm stuck in a moment is laugh, because it really breaks up kind of the intensity of that moment and the frustration, and allows us to, without resistance, think about what we want the next moment to look like, what we want the next moment to feel like.
I love that in regards to levity, right? Laughter and levity. But how does a person get there, especially if they are, I love how you assess getting out of being stuck, right? But how would a person get there in regards to understanding the value of levity? Because it's so interesting. As Jamie and I are talking, and we have the I love technology. We're talking and we are recording this podcast, but we're utilizing Zoom. So I love it because I have a chance to see her and to see her facial expressions and to see her passion. And I as soon as you talked about levity and laughter, and then I saw that the beauty and the levity and in your face, right? It just, here we are just smiling at one another, guys, as we're sitting here talking, which I loved. Tell us, what can an individual do in regards to really being able to embrace, right, that levity, that laughter, and letting that in to really help build their journey?
I think we take ourselves way too seriously, and I think we take life too seriously. I think we take it all too seriously, and that is kind of the problem. I think that we often think that other people are seeing us the way we're seeing ourselves in our worst moment.
Mm.
And that is absolutely not true because other people are so involved with themselves, they're not even looking at us. So I, I am laughing all the time because every time I catch myself judging myself or another, I begin to laugh, which is very helpful to me to understand where I am in this moment with myself. So every moment that feels not good to you, check in with yourself and ask yourself, like, oh, like, what's the deal? What is going on? And in not a judgmental way, but in a very loving and curious way, because it can be a clue for you where you are with yourself. And then what would you like to do with it? You know, the minute you laugh, it kind of breaks the moment up, and then you have a choice for the next moment. Often I ask people to distract themselves, like look around if you see children playing or put on some music or drown yourself out if you feel really, really stuck and give yourself a little mental break. But when you come back to yourself, try to do it in a more loving and accepting and non-judgmental way.
I love that in terms of really nurturing yourself, right? In terms of really nurturing and loving yourself,
Yeah.
right? And it's so, so important in terms of really moving forward and really being able to embrace ourselves. I think it's so, so important. And it's interesting that you mentioned loving because your book is the ever loving essence of you. And I love the title. I love the book in regards to letting people understand really more of the dynamics of themselves. What are some words of wisdom that you would share with our audience in regards to who are looking to build a life that they deserve?
Trust yourself. You always know whether you know how or why you know for yourself. You know better for yourself than anybody else. So really trust yourself and guide yourself with intuition. Your intuition is like a guardian angel sitting on your shoulder, tapping you and helping you tune in so that you can direct yourself wherever it is that you're wanting to go. Um, so know yourself, trust yourself, love yourself. Yeah. And be gentle with yourself.
I love that. Know yourself, trust yourself, and be gentle with yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I like to ask you one more question before we wrap up the show. And courting happiness is so much about one's commitment to their happiness and their well being. And you are such a transformative individual and strategist and really provide such great advice, wisdom, and knowledge to your clients and your community. I'm curious about how you, as an individual, how do you commit to your happiness and your well-being?
I am probably one of the most selfish people on the planet because I do not do anything that doesn't feel good to me ever. It is my number one priority to have the connection with myself every moment and feel good. So if someone asks me to do something and I am not feeling good about that, I will say to them, let me think about that and get back to you. And I will think about it and ask myself, can I do this unconditionally with two hands and feel good about it? And if I can, then I say yes. And I am so happy to do that. And if I can't, then I get back to them and say, I'm sorry, that doesn't resonate with me. Because when we are connected to ourselves, then we can unconditionally connect with other people. And I think that that is the most beautiful way to move about the world and to stay feeling good about yourself and other people. So it gets very addictive feeling good. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. It's about staying true to yourself. And I love that, in terms of, I'm adding that to my permission slip, by the way, Jamie, what you just shared in regards to
It's
what feels good to you.
yeah. What
What
feels good?
Yeah, I love
Mhm.
that. I love it because it's honoring yourself and your feelings. I
Yes.
treasure what you just shared. I receive what you just shared. It's wonderful. So I am so grateful that you are here. And for all of those who are listening, how can our audience connect with you, and where can they really be able to find you online?
I have a website. It's www.jamie-lerner.com.
Excellent, guys, and it's a wonderful website. I was living on there for the past few days. It's really great in terms of resources and
The
sharing
resource.
information, and also getting to know Jamie much more. It has been an honor to getting to know you today, Jamie. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Kourting Happiness podcast, and thank you so much for all the great work that you're doing.
Thank you for inviting me.
Let's continue this conversation online. Email us at podcast@drkortnialston.com. That's podcast at drkortnialston.com. Join us on Instagram at Kourting Happiness. Don't forget, that's courting with a K. Also, I hope you join our private Facebook community. You can find us at Kourting Happiness Podcast Community. Our private Facebook group is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? We hope you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. Congratulations on your continued commitment to your courting happiness journey. Thank you so much for listening. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.